We're up to the afternoon tests. We're middle of going through the Zayin Mitzvah B'nai Neach, and we're up to the very bottom of the page. The Shlokish added a few other Isurim. Talk about striking another person, or just lifting a hand to hit another person. So we're up to the Gemara on the bottom of the page. Comes along the Shlokish, 3 lines at the bottom of the page. If a goy observes Shabbos, he is Chayiv Misa. And it says, Yom v'layla lo yishbosu. That there's a lot. Noach was told that day and night, normal pshat is that day and night itself won't rest because the Eibush is not going to bring a mabel anymore. Everything will go back to normal. But now we're darshaning that you, people, shouldn't rest 24 hours in a row. You have to be productive. Right? You learned before that their warnings, that's their misa. So in other words, by a goy, if they observe Shabbos, if you're 7-day Adventist and you observe Shabbos, with no malachas, you are chayiv. And Omer Avina feel sheni b'Shabbos, even on Monday. That's what it normally means. Exactly. But we're teaching the Shlokim long as Machadish that a non-Jew is not permitted to observe Shabbos. And in Shabbos Chaim says the famous question: so how does Avraham Avinu keep Shabbos and all the others that keep Shabbos? So there are a number of answers, but one of the answers is beautiful answer from the Pinchas Balafla. He answers, if you look closely in this pasuk, it says Yom v'layla lo yishbosu. The difference between a Yid and a Goy is by a Jew, our 24 hours is night followed by day. By a Goy, their 24 hours is day followed by night. So therefore, a Yid, Avraham Avinu worked on Friday afternoon, and Avraham Avinu worked Motzei Shabbos. So as a Yid, he kept Shabbos 100%. But as a Goy, there was no 24-hour period that he rested because their 24-hour period is Yom v'layla. So Friday by day he worked, and Motzei Shabbos he worked, so there's no problem there. Interesting, he says even Mondays, because Rashi says Sundays was their day of rest. So we're just saying even Monday. Seems like in times of the Shlokish already, Sunday was a day of rest. Which it was in the Christian world. Well, I think you're right. How much history was 70 years before. Yeah, they were Shlokish Amoraim already, first generation Amoraim. The Rambam writes the reason why they cannot observe Shabbos is you're not allowed to take on mitzvahs as if it's a mitzvah. Even though I told you yesterday, the Rambam writes for Ferish that if a guy wants to do any mitzvah in Torah, they can. But if he does it only knowing it's not a mitzvah, but he's doing a voluntary basis. Here we're talking about doing the mitzvah, l'shay mitzvah. That he cannot do. Freddie Moore, let's very bottom of the page. A guy cannot keep Shabbos. So let's really got behind mitzvahs. So why don't we count that in the 7 mitzvahs, make it 8? We're only counting those mitzvahs that you have to be active, not passive. Says what about the mitzvah of dinin, which is basically setting up courts, and a court is a court is you have to set up a whole penal system, and that's a kumvasei. Because chashiv is part of the mitzvahs. Says the Gemara, it has both of it. Kumasei v'shaval taisinu, because it has 2 parts to it. One is that you have to set up courts and everything else and all the laws, but also you're not allowed to be corrupt. Not being corrupt is passive. Not taking sheikhad, all these things, that's all being passive. So because there's a combination of kumasei shaval taisa, we can count it. But all the other mitzvahs, well, the other ones are shaval taisa. Don't do avodah zorah. Don't be a megadet. They're all shaval taisa. I said, furthermore, if a guy studies Torah, he's Chayiv. It says Torah, said the Torah gave it to Moshe, Moirash Alana. What does Moirash Alana mean? 2 ways of understanding. We'll see in a minute. Lana Moirash Alana, it was given to us and not to them. Nu Velechri Gabe Zayin Mitzvah, so why don't you count this as a Zayin Mitzvah? Because here this is a Shabbat Taisa. Don't learn Torah. So Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Because whatever the Aveira is already included. Mandam Merosha means that it's our inheritance, so nobody belongs to us. Mizakal Gazel, he's stealing. And Mandam Ma'irasa, the one who says that Ma'irasa, that it was a betrothed to us, Dina Kenaida Murasa. It's like it's adultery. What's the Chay of Machlekes? He's thinking that maybe Machlekes is as follows. What happens if I steal something, but you don't lose anything from it? Am I a ganef? I mean, the Gemara talks about Nez and Nesher. If I steal something to give you back double, so you didn't lose your gain. But the point is, there you didn't get it now; you're going to get it later. The question is if you're allowed to. Yet we learned the Gemara about Masa that if you should steal people's things, improve it and give it back to them. How can you do that? Still a ganef. So maybe that is when if a guy learns Torah Is that and let's say it's called stealing, but what did we lose from that? What did we lose from that? Took, but we didn't lose anything. So maybe that's the machlekes. Is that called a ganef or not? One opinion says that's still called a ganef. Another opinion says, look at Eve. Eve stole. He was according to the opinion, he was a goy. He stole, and he gave it back. He doubled, and he was and it was a Yirei Lakim, and all these wonderful things he says about him. That it's not a ganef because a ganef is the other person has to lose. Because actually, it's in the tzas and the sibus, the big machlekes. What ganef is the act of taking, or the fact that I'm holding something of yours. So the same idea is the fact that you lost something. Just like by tzedakah, is the mitzvah tzedakah for me to give or for you to get? And big enough community halach. Like we say, if you lost something, you had no idea, the other person got it, you became tzedakah, but that doesn't really prove anything because the fact is it still came from you. But we had Yirmiyahu in the Gemara Basa in the first page. In the end, we davened to the Eibishter, please, that these are shoyim. Even if they give tzedakah, they shouldn't get credit because the people who are receiving it are con artists. They're not really so what, but they gave. Is that ayah that if you give with the best intentions, but if the person who's receiving it is not the right person, it's not a mitzvah. So the main mitzvah is giving. Anyway, so maybe that's the machlekes here by stealing. The Rambam writes allowed to learn Torah with a Christian in his letter. You're allowed to learn Torah with a Christian. You're not allowed to learn Torah with a Muslim. The Christian because they respect that this is from the Eibishter. Muslims don't believe that it comes from the Eibishter, the Old Testament. So therefore you're not allowed to learn with them. Anyway, we learned Chagig if you gimel about if you're allowed to teach a great Torah. Big machlekes of Kiv Eiger and the Marsha in the Flamen Aleph and Shabbos. If you're allowed to learn Torah with a prospective geir or not, is he allowed to learn Torah because he wants to become a geir? Can he learn Torah or not, or only those things which are necessary and so. Big machlekes. But anyway, let's continue. I'll ask you a question. Meir, a kohen gadol learns. A guy learns Torah is treated like a kohen gadol because a kohen gadol is said by Torah. Yikari, the Sacharim say, Yikari b'pninim is so precious, and the kohen gadol goes to the kodesh hakadoshim. And you learn this. It says that Adam will do them and they will live with it. With the Torah, they will live with it. And it doesn't say kohenim levim. We say like nemer el ha'adam, the person. It says maybe learn that Adam, anybody. If you learn Torah, he's like a kohen gadol. And the answer is Hasam b'sheva mitzvahs they do. What do you call it? They're talking about b'sheva mitzvahs do. He's learning Torah which negate his 7 mitzvahs. Rashi says right over here that this Gemara Meir argues. Who's he arguing? We have a rule. Whenever it says the name first and then afterwards Omar, it means he's arguing with somebody. Who's he arguing with? So Rashi says he's arguing with those who say that Atem kriyim Adam be'ein umas ha'olam kriyim Adam. That only Eden are called Adam. And Rameir says here, it says Sheyasai Adam, it doesn't say Kohen Israeli, must be Goyim included. Rabbeinu Tam completely argues, but very interesting Rabbeinu Tam shitty because it's really hard to understand a little bit. Rabbeinu Tam says there's a difference between Ha'adam and Adam. Atem kruim Adam. Eden are called Adam, but Ha-Adam could be Goyim as well. Like you think about it, usually Ha means very exclusive. This. You would think the other way around. The Ha-Adam would be Eden and Adam Stam would be everybody. But Rabbeinu Tam says verkehrt, and that needs an explanation. But interesting is in the Mendel Bayless case. In the Mendel Bayless case in 1911, there in Russia. So one of the accusations the prosecutor said is Atem Krim Adam Be'enos Adam Krim Adam. So that means we treat the goyim like subhuman. They're not mentioned. And you know the Rashab was involved, all these great the Rabbonim and everybody was involved, lawyers from all over the world. Big case. It's also a blood libel. So one Rav, which I don't remember the name, but it's a Rav nobody ever heard of before. I still don't remember who it is. Forgot his name. Got up and said, "Can I answer?" And he says, "There's different, words in the Torah for people. Ish and together. What's so special? Every word has it in singular and in plural. The only word that we are referred to, and there's no chilik is Adam. You're one person's Adam, and the Rabbi is Yoch. And this is what he says: the chiluk between the Ed and the Goy is other nations. You have Russians, you have Hungarians, you have Polish. Each nation is their own. If a Polish person is in jail, who in France cares? And if a Russian, But by Yidden, we're all one. Doesn't matter where you live. You have American lawyers here, you have these people here, because we are Adam. Atam Kriyam Adam. You're the only one that's always Lashon Yachid. Wherever you are, we're all one. And yeah, that's shot. Very much so. Very much so. Anyway, I forgot his name. Taking further, but he adds afadam menachai, not only eva menachai, but you count, but also even blood from a living, you're not an animal, you're not allowed. Talk about learn. It says in pasuk, ach boser benafshai dame loisaychlu. It says in the pasuk, but boser benafshai. So boser benafshai is eva menachai dom, and then he says dame the blood loisaychlu. These are two avedas here. One, ze eva menachai. The Tanakhama said this is all eva menachai. However, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says Af Hadam Minachai. Because it says Bosa Benafsh is one, and says Domli, as we'll see more in a minute, it's two Avedas here. He says Kribe Bosa Benafsh Loisech as if there's two Avedas here. Bosa Benafsh you don't eat, that's a limb from a living animal, and Domli Benafsh Loisech, blood from a living animal don't eat. That's two Avedas. But Rabban, what do they do with the word dummy? What do you need dummy for? If you're not allowed to, if there's no separate aveda of having the blood from a living animal other than Easter blood. So then Rabbanon, why does it say it? Ahu lemishe shratzim adasa. Shratzim are different. By an animal, the blood and the flesh are two different parts. By shratzim, halachically, the blood and the flesh, the basa is considered one, and therefore there's no separate Easter of eating dam there. So the Gemara. And we'll see what we learn from there is we'll see in a minute. Make sure you don't eat. And like the mother says, chazak, even something which is means to people, you have to strengthen yourself against the Yetzer Hara. Chazak, who has a taivet dam, and yet there's a chazak. So and he says kadamu nefesh because the nefesh passes out to the dam, and you shouldn't eat nefesh abasa. So again, you have these Adam. And Rabbanon, what do they do with that? Ahu l'tam hakodesh haneshama yitzba. He's saying over here that the blood, that you have the blood of that when you shech the initial blood that squirts out, and then you also have blood, the damatam. So then you have the blood which is very thick and it's not red in color, it's sort of blackish in color, and that blood as well is called dam hakodesh. And what do you call it? That when is the dam? Also, if it's dam hanefesh, and the question, what's dam hanefesh? Dam hanefesh is not dam hakozer when you let blood, when you extract blood, it's dam hakozer, and only dam hanefesh. That's what it says in the pasuk. When is the is of dam? Only the dam that has the nefesh in it, but not the dam that you stam. You extract blood, you let blood. How do I know what dam hanefesh is? So we say it's not just initial squirt, but also the thick blood that comes out afterwards. It's blackish. A very dark color.
It's interesting that when you have the damhakosa, you have this bright red blood. That's oxygenated blood, which is in the arteries.
It's about shechting in the neck now, which comes out.
Bringing oxygen to the body. Dark, heavy blood is the deoxygenated. That's when it's on the way back to the body.
So when they shech, which is near the heart and everything else, you have the arteries.
That's good. It means they hit an artery. So.
Exactly. Talking about it further. Now that's a general question. Why do you have some mitzvahs that are repeated twice? They repeat it again, after Matan Torah. The famous Rambam in Chulin that says that we don't do mitzvahs today because what was said to Avram by Bris Milah. We do it because the Pasha said to Eden after Matan Torah. Everything we do is because after post Matan Torah. But why do we have certain mitzvahs repeated twice? He gives a very important rule, two rules. He says as follows. Any mitzvah recorded in the Torah to Bnei Noach, and then the Nishnas B'Sinai repeated again. You ask yourself, why is it repeated again? To tell you that like this: if the mitzvah is not repeated, and since all mitzvahs are for Yidden, we'll say that maybe until Matan Torah it belonged to everybody because everybody was a Bnei Noach. But once Matan Torah came along, it was taken away from the Bnei Noach and passed on, transferred only to Yidden. But if it's repeated again, why repeat it again for? If the mitzvah we already had before is to tell you that the mitzvah now, the original mitzvah remains where it is for Bnei Noach, and now have a mitzvah for Eden as well. So that's the general rule. So if it's repeated, is nemra. It's the both. If it's given to Bnei Noach and not given again, the Yisrael nemra only which mitzvah was written before Matan Torah was not repeated. We only have Gid Hanosha, the Liba de Rabbi Yehuda. We're going to Rabbi Yehuda. We'll have a whole machlekes. According to Chachamim, the mitzvah of Gid Hanosha was not given till after Matan Torah. So why was written there in Parsha Vayishlach is because Moshe Rabbeinu then decided to give the context to this mitzvah. Muslims are more Gid Hanosha can't eat, so he put it in the Torah by the story there, so you understand where the base of the Isra. That's the opinion of Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda says no. The Isra of Gid Hanosha was given right then and there. That's when the Isra of Gid Hanosha is given, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's the only mitzvah we have, which is given once. We don't find Gid Hanosha ever repeated again in the Torah. To tell you that Lezen Emer Lezen, how do we know that? How do we know that if it's written twice? Because we know from the mitzvah of Avodah Zarah. By Avodah Zarah, we know from Shabbat Lakim, we learn that there's no Avodah Zarah by Bnei Noach, and then we find that the Eibusha says when you go to Yisrael, don't replicate the behavior of the goyim who bow down and do all these Avodah Zarah and everything else. So it's repeated again, and we know that the goyim are being punished post-Matan Torah because they were idol worshippers. What does that tell us? That even though it was repeated again after Matan Torah, it still remains an Aveda for the Eden. Why? Because it's said twice. If it's repeated again, it's both. In logic, I can argue for catch. Why was it repeated again? Because if it was meant for to remain where it is, leave it where it is. Just leave it. B'nai kept it. Now the Eden will keep it, and the Eden will always include B'nai. Why should things change? So isn't faked repeated again and saying now it's only exclusively a Yiddish mitzvah? That's what I was asking in logic. The says no. We find in the Aseret Hadibros the laws of Avodah Zarah, and it's also part of Zayim Mitzvah. And the Ashchen, the Onash, and we find that the guy will punish because of Avodah Zarah. Shemamino, well, if that was repeated, it does not take it away from the goyim. So why is it Ulazeh Nemla? It goes to both of them, to Eden and to goyim. What about Bnei Noach? And it's not repeated in Sinai. If it was only said once, Yidanosha belongs to them. And that's the only thing. You were to argue. The Eden will consider the whole gang of the Gemara is Eden with Bnei Noach before Matan Torah. So the mitzvahs were given to everybody before. Universal mitzvahs. So if it's not repeated again to the Eden, let it remain that way. Why do you say it's taken away from the Goyim and now given only to the Eden? How can it be? Forget, I'll argue. Now that the Eden are no longer Bnei Noach, they became Bnei Yisrael. Like we had yesterday, and Eved is no longer Bnei Noach, but he's not a Yisrael yet. He's in a state of limbo. But now that the Eden left Bnei Noach, became Yisrael, and their mitzvah wasn't repeated, forget. Eden Noach is only for Bnei Noach, for example, and not for Eden. Maybe. So the Gemara Leka immediately saw Shari Ucham Asr. There's nothing out there. It's impossible that for a goy it should be Asr, and for Yid it should be Mutter. So Teish already asked, what about Shabbos? So Teish says, we're not talking about where the Eibusha made a mitzvah out of it. We're talking about Shari, that a goy it's Asr for Yid is Mutter. Mashen getting in Shabbos, it's a mitzvah for us to keep Shabbos. It's not mutter for us. You have to keep Shabbos. I'm learning Torah. It's a mitzvah to learn Torah. So that's not what we're talking about here. And there is, and don't ask a question. But Yifas Toya, we learned before that the din of Yifas Toya only applies to a Yid, that you can take someone else's wife during a state of war, but a guy doesn't have that right. So you have it more chomer by a guy than by a Yid. It's not a chumrah by a guy over a Yid. We also not allowed to take someone's wife away, stam in the It's only during a war when you have a mitzvah of kibush and everything else. And since goyim don't have this mitzvah of kibush, therefore they don't have that entitlement. It's not a chumrah or kula. This is just the circumstances are different. What about stealing and put this about goy is chai missing by Yid, you're not? Again, a chumrah by goy. Saying more again, it's not a chumrah. Hosam should lab and mechilin you. Yidin, unless I put you said not. Ameichel. And goyim Rashi says here, b'nei noach achzorim hen. The last four words of Rashi. Goyim won't be meichel even for a half a pruta. It's worthless. It doesn't matter. You won't meichel even a half a pruta. Tases are very important tases here. I'll just quote you the tases about abortion. So tases says, I have a question. If the baby's inside the mother's womb, so you're not allowed to kill the mother. Once the baby's alive, you don't kill the mother anymore, and so on, because you're not doing nefesh. But while the baby is still, let's say, inside the mother's womb by Yid, and the mother's life is being threatened. We'll have this Gemara. The mother's life is being threatened. You can, said the Gemara uses the expression, cut up the baby inside the fetus to save the mother. You're allowed to save you're allowed to do an abortion if the mother's life is on the line. But a guy, you can't. We said before it's murder. And why murder one nefesh? You have no right. Why is your blood red in another person? So here you have a chumrah by a goy that we don't have by Yid. That's his question. Very important question. And Tezi gives two answers. He said, first of all, he says, by Yid it's a mitzvah. Remember, Tezi said, Shabbos, Torah, it's a mitzvah is different. But then Tezi says, maybe a goy also is allowed to do abortion in that case. So Tezi has two opinions here. Very interesting. So goy is allowed to do abortion when the mother's life is on the line, is in danger, because for them a fetus is mamish alive and will be murdered.
The mother was
there's a machlek in Nacharayim. First of all, you have this Shabbos, by the way. But there's a machlek in something. There's a machlek in the poskim where there's only color chadashav. This thing here. It's only when it's like 9 months or 8 months, but for sure, or even before that. In Hilchos Shabbos, many poskim hold that even less than 40 days you're allowed to do Mechal Shabbos to save the child. And let's continue. What about bris milah? It says bris milah was said to Avraham Avinu. Repeating Sinai. According to you, every guy should have to mal themselves. The Gemara says no. When the Taylor Stam repeats it randomly, then we'll say why. Here the Taylor came to teach you halacha. Over here, how the Mishnah Shabbos does it. That's not telling you the mitzvah bris. It's coming to tell you the halacha that Yom Hashmini Yom Saralasa feel b'Shabbos. That's the chiddush here. So it's not a repetition to teach you something new you didn't know before. Big machlek is in the poskim whether milah is doiche Shabbos or is hutter on Shabbos. And after a minute, how far you can go, how much chil Shabbos you can do. But Yom Hafil b'Shabbos. Okay, what about Pividivya? Pruruvu. Shenemra livnei nayach. See, Atem Pruruvu and Vanish Sinai. Where do you find Pruruvu by Sinai? After Matan Torah, it says in the posting there, Lech Emelem. Now you go back and tell them in Meschana there, Shu lechem lelechem. Go back to your homes, go back to your wives, which is the mitzvah Pruruvu. Why would tell them go back to your wives? For 3 days we're not allowed to be together. Now you go back to your wives. And according to them, and we know that we know the mitzvah Pruruvu is only by Yidden. I told you the thesis in Chagiga, the base on the base where he says Akol b'nei kan nemra. Famous thesis and the Turievan, the Shagzari, we all talk about. Thesis says that maybe Goyim also had the mitzvah Pruruvu. Other thesis says in Basa Gimel that it's the mitzvah of Shevet Torah is on Goyim. Pruruvu is only on Yidden. But Taisus and Chagiga said Pruruvu was on Goyim as well, and they all wonder how you fit in with this Gemara right here. Clear, it says it's not. You know what you pasuk? The Abisha said, "I want you to separate from your wife so you can be kaddish or Torah and you should be and all that should be prepared for Matan Torah." So why do you have to tell them to give permission to go back home? As soon as the reason lapses, you can go back home. It's to teach you that even though the reason lapsed, you still need a bezin to come along and paskin that this Issa is no longer there. Big machlek is Rashi and Teisir, another Rishonim, Bechlau, and that is what happens if the bezin gives a time, like Rabbi Gershom said, that I'm making these rules, you cannot divorce your wife against her will, or she can't marry a second wife until the end of the millennium. But no bezin came along at the end of the millennium and said, okay, now it's permitted. Is that Issa still intact today? So the machlek is that where bezin gives a set time, and that time elapses, what happens? Is it automatically become mutter, which is what Rashi seems to be saying here, and the way Tosfos in many places understands Rashi? Or is it, in that case, for sure it lapses? It's, the Gemara is talking about when you gave a reason. The reason why it's forbidden is this and this, and then and the reason elapses, then you need a bezin to come along. So the Gemara further, every single mitzvah that's repeated twice, say that the reason why it's repeated, say it's only to Yidden and not to Goyim, and the reason why it's repeated is because some new din, because always new din we're learning out. As harder, meda Mr. Lamali. You're right. There's always new din we're learning out, but the Torah also gives a warning: don't do avodah zarah. Why repeat the warning? The warning we already know. You want to repeat for the new dinim? Just tell us the new dinim. The only mitzvah that we have that is not repeated again at all is Gidanosha, according to Yehuda. So Gemara says, Haninabi lo isne. So these also shouldn't be repeated then. Mila and all that. We answer again. Hani isne shemil sebalma. Hala isne klal. The difference is by Gidanash is not repeated at all. Because Gidanash is not repeated at all, so we know it's only to Yid, not to Goyim. These mitzvahs are repeated. Bris Mila is as if it's not repeated, and therefore it's only to Yidden. It is repeated. It's only for the new din that we learn from it. Another reason by Mila, from the very beginning, it's not that he gave him. It's like Gidanash was given. So from the very beginning, was given only to Avraham Avinu. It was only given to Avraham Avinu. Where I said, "After you as brisi tishma, you should guard my bris. After you and your children afterwards, the doiraisam says clearly you and your zara, not to everybody. It wasn't a universal law. We'll get in a second. After and you and your descendants, in a shachin loy. So bnei Yishmael, it says zaracha, all your children. So how come? So then the Arabs also have to mal themselves. He says, no, it says the pasuk, Yitzchak Yikar. Who's Zerah? Only Yitzchak. Only Yitzchak's descendants. Okay, so Yitzchak had an Esav. Let all the Romans, the Christians. Big Yitzchak, local Yitzchak. He says, big Yitzchak. Within Yitzchak, I'll call Zerah, not all the descendants of Yitzchak. Remember, he married also Keturah, which according to some is Hagar, and they had many children. They also should not be chayv in bris milah, right? Because it says it says the pasuk as brisi heifar. If you don't do this, it says that if you don't mala yourself, as brisi heifar, you're breaching my covenant. The rabbis b'nei Keturah, to tell you that b'nei Keturah also is in. If you don't mala them, then you breach my covenant. So we have a special. This one answers. We answered because we have a special pasuk that b'nei Keturah are chayiv also in bris milah. Now the big machlek is between Rashi and the Rambam. Rashi says that b'nei Keturah. I'll just read it in Rashi. Rashi b'nei Keturah. Only oisam shisha shenodu Avram. Only those 6 children of Avram. Hein atzmon. They themselves. The most question was loy lechayiv. Who should be chayiv, right? And so even Avram didn't mal all of his children. So we answered that b'nei Keturah. Oisam shishim levadim alezaru. Rashi holds that only b'nei Keturah chayiv in bris milah and none of their descendants. Only Avram had a mitzvah to mal all of his descendants. The Rambam says that b'nei Keturah means them and zar machreim. So Rambam paskas that b'nei Keturah are chayiv in bris milah. But then, since we don't know who b'nei Keturah is, because b'nei Yishmael got mixed up b'nei Keturah, and therefore everyone side b'nei Yishmael, side b'nei Keturah are chayiv in what do you call it? In a bris. So Aaron chayiv in a bris comes along the Shagas Aryeh in his chulas, and he says he doesn't understand. Since Sanhedrin came along and mixed up the whole world, so because he mixed up the whole world, so l'chayda these we don't know who's Yishmael Keturah, and the majority of the world are not b'nei Keturah. You tell me the only reason why Yishmael has to mal it because there might be b'nei Keturah. But now that everyone got mixed up all together, there's a machlekes regarding Mitzrayim, but regarding everybody else, they all got mixed up together. So therefore, you should be patik about what's the Rambam saying that every b'nei Yishmael b'nei Keturah chayiv in bris milah today.
That's the same thing about
What? And of course not, because we kept telling mitzvahs all the time. That's identifies us. So what is so what's pshat? So you make the question. So the Neidah B'Yehuda in the Tshuva in Ebenezer, the Tshuva says that what's your question? It should be bottle b'roiv, right? You say be bottle b'roiv. So Neidah B'Yehuda says that gufa you learn from a pasuk acher am lahatas. This only applies to Yidden, not to goyim. There's no din bottle b'roiv by goyim, and that's why b'nei Yishmael b'nei Keturah chayiv. Comes along means the chinik asks a brilliant question. Okay, if no roiv, then fakert. Then every goy today should be chayiv. Every guy is a possibility because Sachar mixed up the whole world. Every guy in the world maybe really b'nei Keturah, b'nei Yishmael, or b'nei Keturah. So why is the Rambam limited only to b'nei Keturah, b'nei Yishmael? The question would be punk fakert. Instead of they should all be parted from Milah, every single guy in the world should have to be Mala in their child. That's his question. So someone answered, I think Shalmeshev answers, he wants to say that even if the goyim that we follow the Reiv, the goyim don't follow the Reiv, but you still need a niyut that's chashuv. And the vast majority of the world definitely outnumber by far the B'nai Keturah. So it's not even a miyat harchashuv, and that's why they're not chayiv. Anyway, interesting idea. Let's get to the Gemara. That you can eat all the vegetation there. You and the animals share the same food. But you're not allowed to eat chayes others. But when Noach came along and after the flood, he was mata shenemer. It says in pasuk that you can have anything that crawls on the ground you can eat. Just like vegetation you can eat also animals. Maybe also is no longer even a chai. In fact, a question I'm asking, I can't remember what the answer is. So why did you have to answer even a chai to Adam Marishan if you're not allowed to eat meat? So this is a raya. There's some opinions that say when we say Adam Marishan not eat meat, he's not allowed to kill an animal to eat. Who are you? You know better than an animal. But if the animal died on its own, they were allowed to eat it. So therefore, we would have thought if the egg fell down on its own, maybe you can eat it. And that's why you need Isa Evim and a chai, which L'chayr explains that. But the Tamalayim Arbasa Benafshe Domlas Chilum is a mefesh in the pasuk that Evim and a chai is still forbidden. Right? Yochel Af L'Shrotzi. I would have thought Evim and a chai applies to us as well. Tamalayim only by animals, not by Evim and a chai. Umay Talmud how do you learn from there? He said blood. Animals with the blood is one thing halachically, and the flesh is another thing. Fine. Then you have an isur of Evim and Achai. Yotu shrotzim she'ein damam chaluk mibsarim. By them, their dam is not separated from their basar, and therefore there's no Evim and Achai there. Makes a question. You're telling me that not like me, but do bit gasayam. Interesting about here. It said that you should control the fish in the sea. My lav lachil control. What way? That you can eat it. And the Gemara is learning that any living thing, it's not the word dafke animal. But if you want to be a vegan, you got to be all the way. Anything alive, anything living, you cannot eat. You can't eat fish either. I said no. Loyla malacha. When it says reduv the gasaya, it means control the fish that they can work for you. How can fish work for you? Yes. Kid Rechava, like Rechava once asked a question. The boy Rechava asked a question. What happens if is it klayim if you have a goat and a fish called shibuta working together, or pulling a plow or pulling a wagon? They're both doing it together. Is that considered klayim? You see, fish can work in the sea as well. There's a famous Radak that writes that shibuta. What kind of fish is shibuta? He says shibuta is the word Shabbat, Shabbos. This is a fish that is found under. It's a very deep sea fish, so fishermen generally can't get to it. But on Shabbos, it surfaces, and therefore, this fish was named Shabbos. And some Amoraim were machmed dafka to eat this fish on Shabbos because this fish represented Shabbos. Others actually argue that shibuta is a treasure fish. We'll have Ma'atosh coming here. It says you control also the birds. My lav lachila. When you control the birds, you can eat it. You see, other can eat. Work with the birds. What are you talking about? You can work with birds. Dosh. But you had let's say you used two species of a fowl. Can they is a climate? Rabbi Yehuda says, because there's one opinion that says that you have to have, that you have to work with your hands and your feet in order to be if you want to be able to eat while you're working, you have to be able to work with all your hands and your feet. What happens? These birds only have feet. That's their whole work. Is it the whole? Whatever's capable of working, so it's working, not let it muzzle them, or because they're not working with the hands and the feet, only with the feet, because the birds, maybe there's what so we see the birds can work. Wow. So the fresh. It says he controls every animal that crawls around. So it comes to include the snake. What do you mean the snake? What kind of control do you have over the snake? Because snakes can do work. What do you mean? What a pity. Al-Shamish Gadol, the greatest possible worker for us, we lost after the story of the Old Magician. If the snake would not have been destroyed, every Yid would have had two snakes as servants. He would have two snakes, even good ones. One he would send to the north, one to the south. And bring him some nice stones, other precious stones, because it's so close to the ground. They will put some kind of a strap underneath their tail. He'll bring you soil for your gardens and for your ruins. So, in other words, it's talking about the snake. Mason asked a question. Why were the snakes so envious of Adam Rishon? He was sitting in Eden. He had a barbecue. The Malach, they were roasting meat, and they were filtering the wine. Hated by Noach. The snake saw what a comfortable life they had. In his covered, then his and he was envious. So we see he ate meat. So my husband bought it. So my meat came Shemayim. Now, according to those Rishonim, which we just said, and their proof is that Adam was allowed to eat meat that died on its own. Why don't we just answer instead of coming up with a teretz Basar Ibn Shemayim? Just say that Basar that died, unless, as the Gemara will say, maybe it's not a kosher animal, and maybe there's a question about Adam kept mitzvahs as well, and maybe Adam also kept the mitzvah that he would not eat an animal that just died, even though he's technically allowed to, and the people were allowed to. And that's why he personally. And especially while he was in Gan Eden. In Gan Eden, you think he's reif. Anyway, Mika Boss, we're talking about Fleisch comes to Shemaim. Yes, was traveling, Pogo by Hanach Ayos, came these lines, that were roaring at him. Omar, he said the Pasuk, they're roaring because they're hungry. Mitamol, the two pieces of meat came down, one was eaten by the lions, and the one that didn't eat it, it was so full. I see he took the meat, and he went to the Beis HaMedrash, and Boila asked, tell me who's that David Can I eat it or not? It came from Shemayim. What do you think? Of course, nothing Tommy came from Shemayim. What about it came from Shemayim, but it looked like a donkey? Do you assume now it's treif or not? He said to him, Yarud Nala. Yarud is the name of a bird. Nala is shaita. You shake the bird. He said, "Ain't David Tamei Yevin Shemayim." Very not nice. Call him.
The shrink is off.
Yeah, you fared. Imagine like my Rebbe used to call me. You fared over there. That's such a klutz kasha. Well, precedent. Anyway, we'll stop over here. We'll learn tomorrow night.